Rabaul is a town located in eastern New Britain, Papua New Guinea. Japanese forces landed on Rabaul on 23 February 1942, capturing it in February of that year. The former Australian territory was transformed into a major Japanese naval and air installation. It was heavily relied on by the Japanese, and was used as a launching point for Japanese reinforcements to New Guinea and Guadalcanal. Throughout the Solomons Campaign, neutralizing Rabaul became the primary objective of the Allied effort in the Solomons. Background: after its capture by the South Sea Force in January 1942, Rabaul was developed into a major fleet base by the Japanese, eventually becoming the most heavily defended Japanese position in the South Pacific. Rabaul's strategic location, multiple airfields and large natural harbor made it the ideal staging base for ships, aircraft, troops and supplies during the New Guinea and Guadalcanal campaigns. The Japanese army dug many kilometers of tunnels as shelter from Allied air attacks. They also expanded the facilities by constructing army barracks and support structures. By 1943 there were about 110,000 Japanese troops based in Rabaul. After the Japanese lost the hold on Guadalcanal in early 1943, Allied forces began the push up the Solomon Islands to Rabaul. Marine raiders and U.S. Army troops landed on the Russell Islands shortly after, and an air base was established there. U.S. forces then pushed the Japanese out of the New Georgia Island group in August 1943. Here, the Japanese command had invested men and supplies into building an airfield at Munda, all of which proved to be a waste. 5th Air Force aircraft made small attacks in October, and a major Allied raid on Rabaul took place in November. This raid destroyed 52 Japanese aircraft and 5 warships. Then in November, U.S. Marines landed on Bougainville, and its airfield was soon put to use by Allied forces. With the major Japanese possessions around Rabaul captured, Allied air forces could begin to neutralize Rabaul permanently. U.S. Army troops landed on Aurora, which is located on western New Britain, on 15 December 1943, and the 1st Marine Division landed at Cape Gloucester on 26 December. Both landings were part of the attempted isolation of the Rabaul base. Early air attacks. As the major Japanese fleet base in the South Pacific, Rabaul had been under continuous Allied air attack since the first raid by RAF Catalinas in January 1942. However, a lack of resources and the enormous distances involved ensured that these attacks remained small and sporadic for nearly 2 years. Assault of the 5th Air Force and the carrier raids of November 1943. Main article: as a part of Operation Cartwheel, the U.S. 5th Air Force, the Royal Australian Air Force and the Royal New Zealand Air Force, all under the command of General George Kenney, began a sustained bombing campaign against the airfields and port of Rabaul in the fall of 1943. The initial mission was delivered by 349 aircraft on 12 October 1943, but it could not be followed up immediately due to bad weather. A single raid by 50 B-25 Mitchell medium bombers reached the target on 18 October. Sustained attacks resumed on 23 October, culminating in a large raid on 2 November. After the first Japanese attempt to repel the Allied amphibious invasion of Bougainville was thwarted by U.S. Navy surface forces at the Battle of Empress Augusta Bay, the Imperial Navy sent a large naval force from Truk to Rabaul for a second attempt. Lacking a comparable surface force of his own, Admiral William Halsey responded by ordering Rear Admiral Frederick Sherman to launch a dawn attack on the Japanese fleet at Rabaul using the carrier air groups of Saratoga and Princeton, followed up an hour later by a 5th Air Force raid of B-24 Liberator heavy bombers. These attacks succeeded in damaging 6 of the 7 Japanese cruisers present in Simpson Harbor, ending the Japanese threat to the Bougainville landings. A following raid on the 11th of November, including the 3 carriers of Task Group 50.3 commanded by Rear Admiral Alfred E. Montgomery, inflicted additional damage on the light cruiser Agano and shot down 35 Japanese aircraft. The pacification campaign begins. The capture of Bougainville and Buka brought Rabaul within range of land-based U.S. Navy and Marine Corps tactical bombers, setting the stage for the pacification campaign to follow. Rather than attempt to capture the heavily fortified position, the Allies determined to neutralize Rabaul by isolating it and eliminating its air power. The first air attack in the pacification campaign was planned for the 17th of December 1943. It would be based out of the Torokina airfield on Bougainville, and consisted of 31 Marine F-4U Corsairs, 23 RNZAF P-40 fighters, 22 U.S. Navy F-6F Hellcats, and a slightly smaller number of Army Air Forces B-24 bombers. The attack did not receive a large response from the Japanese, so only 7 Japanese fighters were lost. 3 New Zealand P-40s were lost, 2 with the pilots. A similar attack took place on the 19th of December, which cost the Japanese 4 aircraft, 2 credited to Marine fighters. The first large-scale strike took place on the 23rd of December. Different from previous strikes, the Army Air Forces bombers went in first, and the fighters followed afterwards. 40 Japanese fighters responded this time, with 30 claimed to be destroyed by Allied fighters, though Japanese records do not match the Allied claims. Following another raid on Christmas Eve, U.S. Navy carriers attacked the Japanese force at Kavieng, New Ireland in unison with an air raid on Rabaul. The Navy carriers would return to Kavieng on the 1st of January 1944. January became a busy month for Allied aircraft. Throughout the month, the Japanese command devoted valuable carrier aircraft and carrier pilots into the defense of Rabaul. The seemingly hopeless situation in which the Japanese pilots were being fed into was nicknamed the sinkhole in the Bismarcks. January proved costly for the Japanese. 266 fighters were credited to U.S. Marine Corps fighters and bomber gunners alone, not including the physical damage done to Rabaul's land defenses. In February, the Japanese command decided to pull all remaining Japanese airmen and the crews from Rabaul. Between 70 and 120 Japanese aircraft flew from Rabaul to Truk on the morning of the 19th of February. The valuable mechanics attempted to leave Rabaul by ship on the 21st of February, but the ship was sunk by Allied bombers. This marked the end of Japanese air resistance to Allied planes over Rabaul. Pacification. Allied fighters and bombers continued to attack Rabaul through 1944 and 1945. The regular attacks became known as milk runs among the Allied air crews. The only opposition over Rabaul was AA fire, so attacking became a normalcy for Allied airmen and the maintenance crews. Eventually Allied forces came to use Rabaul as a live-fire exercise to give aircrew some taste of combat before committing them elsewhere in the theater. The neutralization of Rabaul was ultimately a disaster for the Japanese. Most of their experienced carrier pilots were lost over Rabaul. Large numbers of the sorely needed aviation maintenance personnel were either lost during their attempted evacuation or trapped there, and the Japanese no longer had a base from which they could threaten the Allied presence in the Solomons. By isolating Rabaul, the Allies effectively made its large garrison prisoners of war without having to fight them. The last Allied airstrike on Rabaul took place on 8 August 1945, only weeks before the Japanese surrender.